Hi, I'm Mitchell Ringos. Welcome to Word for Word, where we offer you an in-depth look at some of our interviews with newsmakers from across the Northwest. A well-known local boxing coach has been arrested by Thunder Bay police. 62-year-old Tony Pimentel was taken into custody. He's been charged with sexual assault and sexual exploitation involving victims who were known to him through the boxing community.
So first of all, I know you said multiple victims. Are you able to disclose, or do you have an idea of how many we're talking here?
I think at this point, there's two charges before the court. I'm not going to speak to how many at this point. Again, we're doing our best effort here to control protecting these individuals who've come forward. This is a very traumatic experience for some of them. Again, you can see the date range. Some of them, there's been trauma been brought back up over what happened over 30 years ago, and so we're really doing what we can control at our best to control that they're protected. Right now, it's 2 counts of sexual assault and 1 count of sexual exploitation.
Yeah, so all these victims, were they directly, you mentioned they're through the boxing community, but were they like directly the people that he coached, or were there also some victims outside of people he worked with?
Again, I don't want to narrow the focus of our investigation. It was involving the boxing community, and so we are looking for anyone that was involved in that community back to 1995 that may have been victimized or witnessed people being victimized.
Is this one of those situations where I guess the more victims come forward, the better, in the sense that I guess they'll be more comfortable to come forward, since it's obviously a traumatic experience and difficult subject matter?
Yeah, in any type of these investigations, the victims, the more victims that come forward, there's more support as a group. Certainly, again, this is very traumatic for the people we've been talking with, and I know there's a lot of hurt, and it's going to be hard for some people to maybe come forward 30 years later and talk about this because they may have want to forget about it. But just know that there's a tremendous amount of support in the community to support victims of sexual assault. Our service takes it extremely serious, and we have victim witnesses through our own police service that we want to support the victims in these cases.
And I know this is a difficult question, but do we know the nature of the sexual assault?
Again, I don't want to get into the nuances of it, but sexual assault in its nature can be on a smaller or lower end of the scale, and neither one is good. So I'll just leave it with they're troubling incidents.
I guess these incidents taking place, was this person a coach at a school, or was this through a private gym? Like, is this how the correlation here? I'm just trying to.
So again, it would be very easy to find publicly. Tony was a national boxing coach, and so again, I'll leave it at that without getting into further details. But I'm sure you can figure that out from there.
Yeah, he certainly had a long career doing this, or something like 30 years. Well, this goes back that far, but yeah, how important is it to have people come forward, given that he had so contact with so many different? Like, is there a chance this might have happened elsewhere in Canada as well?
Of course, that's a possibility. Right now, our investigation is Thunder Bay centered. We know that certainly over 30 years, people may have been victimized in Thunder Bay and moved across Canada, the United States, and so we're making that plea nationally, and I'll say internationally in the sense that we're close to the U.S., that if any of these individuals who have had contact with him over the last 30 years and have been victimized, we want to hear from you. We want to talk to you. We want to help you navigate this and get you the supports you need.
I know sexual assault, being a victim of sexual assault, is a traumatic experience, very difficult to come forward, but is there any other reason why it took almost 30 years for some of these victims to start coming forward?
Again, I'm not going to get into those details, and I think some of that would be a bit unfair to the victims. Again, each individual internalizes what happened to them in their own way and decides how they want to block it or not deal with it. Something in someone's life triggered what happened to them, and it was their time that they needed to talk about it, and they came to the police, and we took it seriously, and we're here today to talk about that.
You said you're reaching out, or you're trying to get anyone who's across the country internationally as well. So has there been any collaboration or work with other police services, RCMP, OPP, pick a municipal police service across the country?
At this point, I can say no. But again, certainly when that happens, we will have those relationships formed and built.
And in what ways, I guess, are the police services and other support groups, I guess, supporting the victims that have been victimized by this assault?
So just simple. My investigators are in contact daily with some of the victims. They have lots of questions. Obviously, there's some fear with going through a court system and what that's all about, and so they're supporting them in that. We have an open line of communication with them. They have our numbers. We have the Sexual Assault Center, which is fantastic in Thunder Bay. We certainly provide the guidance to seek those outside agencies for support. And so, like I said, for us and for me, it's important that our investigators maintain that contact with the victims, make sure that they're in a good place, and if they're not, we get them the support that they need.
And you mentioned here in the press release also the accused is in bail court today.
Correct.
I know the investigation is ongoing. What are some of the other, next steps in the investigation they're trying to find out?
Again, as we talk to one person, there may be 3 more people we need to talk to, right? And so it's just a continued effort of chasing down all the other people that we still have to talk to. Before I came up here, there's some more information came across my desk that needs to be followed up. And so it's a continual working process. There's people we need to talk to. We know there's people in the community who may be aware of some of these things that, because it's never come forward before, didn't think to come to the police. They may have changed their mind at this point. And so that's really who we're encouraging, the individuals that were around, may have knowledge, may have witnessed things that may not have seemed relevant to them at that point. And now, they're seeing that, oh my God, this, something really terrible did happen. And maybe my piece is so small, but I do need to tell the police.
You can't get into too much detail about the victims, but are you able to provide any age ranges at all for the victims?
I'm going to say no, only because, again, we're a small community. We're doing our best to protect these people. We do, I'm not naive to think that at some point it's going to get out, but it's not going to come from the police. We're really going to do our best to protect them. We've given them that. That's part of our approach with our victims. Who are traumatized. That we will do everything that we can control to protect you from the online onslaught that seems to happen quite often in our community these days with certain social media postings. And so that's a real concern for us. And so, like I said, we're trying to do our best there.
The Ronald McDonald House Charity Golf Tournament is coming up next week at the Fort William Country Club, and in preparation for the big fundraiser, Wayne Toyota hosted its annual charity barbecue Wednesday afternoon in support of the cause. Last year, the barbecue was able to raise $10,000 for the Ronald McDonald House.
Perfect. So just talk a little bit about the significance of this barbecue today and how it impacts the Ronald McDonald House.
Well, today's our 8th annual Ronald McDonald barbecue at Wayne Toyota. Back 8 years ago, I spent time with my family at Ronald McDonald, so it's definitely a cause that is at the bottom of my heart. We've been doing it the last 8 years, and between my friends, employees, fellow businesses in town, we all come together for this event every year to really help support the 2 houses. If you've ever been at the 2 houses, you'll know that the support and donations really help those houses and really help the families that end up having to use the houses.
And I was just going to say, how can people How can people get involved and donate to the cause, and why should they, in your opinion?
One way to donate is to come down to one of our events. We have them every year. There's also the Ronald McDonald Charity Golf Tournament that is happening next Friday. So there's the ways to donate there. They also have a 50-50 that's going on right now. So you could go online and donate there as well. And you could always, at the end of the day, donate right directly to the houses. There's one in Toronto, there's one in London, so they're on their websites and so forth. You don't really know until you're actually in a situation where you have a sick child. When you're trying to focus in on them, trying to focus in on the other stuff too, like eating food, where you're going to stay, is really kind of the back of your mind. So to be able to take that off your plate when you're in a stressful situation with a child and a family member, it's a really a big deal. Plus, each of the houses, you're right there. It's easy to walk over, have something quick to eat, and then you walk right back to attend to your child. So and everyone at the houses does a really, really great job. Everyone's volunteers there, well, the majority, I believe, and between the hospitality, the food, everything, they just really make you feel comfortable. And you're also there with other families that are in your similar situations as you, so that really helps you kind of just calm and be able to handle what you have to handle with your particular situation. So
Amazing. That was a great answer. Thanks so much for doing this. And one last thing, is there anything else that I didn't touch on that you feel like you should add?
No, I think Thunder Bay in general does a great job of supporting many causes, and I appreciate everyone that came out today to help support this particular cause.
We're getting a clearer picture of just how far apart public elementary school teachers in the province are when it comes to contract negotiations. The province's biggest teachers' unions are calling for a strike vote this fall if a new deal can't be reached. Local MPP Elise Vaugeois says it's the Ford government's fault for not being able to come to an agreement with the elementary teachers' union, stating the funds for education are being misused.
Did anything surprise you at all with this new budget?
No.
No?
There's not really much to work with in what's there. It's more what's not there that is really critical. Also, when people talk about growth and, the economy improving and so on, growth doesn't always translate to what's happening for people on the ground. Sometimes growth means that, big corporations have added to their wealth, but it doesn't mean that people who are struggling to put food on the table, who can't afford rent because rents are so high, doesn't mean that there's been any change at all in those conditions. And I think that's what we're seeing. Use of the food bank is through the roof, really. And you've got working people who are accessing the food bank. Seniors are accessing the food bank. We know that there's a severe housing crisis really everywhere. And we know that, we know about the green belt, and that it matters to us here in the north as well, because it shows how the government is operating and where their priorities are. I think it's I would call it mildly entertaining, the way that there's an attempt to create a scapegoat, to take responsibility for everything that they've done, all the dishonest dealings that have been taking place in the Greenbelt, and that, to me, that's typical baffle gab. It's a way to distract from the responsibility of the key people, which are the minister and the premier, who've been pushing for acceptance of these Greenbelt deals against massive opposition. So those things affect us also because the rules have changed and a lot of environmental protections have been undermined. Who gets to and where aggregate gravel pits get dug. Those rules have shifted, and there's lots of worry for people in communities in our area about how easy it's going to be to put in gravel pits in residential or holiday areas, and whether that's going to contaminate the water source and so on. So even though these things are, the big noise is in southern Ontario, it's very relevant to us. We also know that I find there's confusion. So the Financial Accountability Office is saying that there's a very substantial budget surplus. That doesn't really show up in this report. We also know that not all the money was spent on education that's allotted for education. The same is true for healthcare. We know that the rules for healthcare have changed so that private corporations are able to move in, and they are then poaching staff from the public system, creating even more of a crisis in healthcare. And the government has created this crisis in the first place by the wage repression policies that they've imposed with Bill 124. Now they are having to make up for that shortfall because people are owed that money. And yet they are still going to court and costing taxpayers money to go to court to fight against the nurses and people in healthcare. There are a lot of twisted objectives and twisted manipulation, I will say, taking place that's actually undermining what people need, undermining public health care, undermining public education, leaving people with huge grocery bills that they can't afford. And where is the housing? So people may know I've been pushing hard for 2 housing projects in our area. One by Suomi-Koti, which would provide 60 units for seniors, and Giwa on Court, which is Bitigong Anishinaabe and Fort William First Nation. That would be repurposing the post office, the old post office, and providing 45 units there. They are still struggling to find the funding to get those things going. They've done so much work already. So there is a lot of frustration and the sense that the priorities are not where they need to be, and that there's dishonesty taking place in the background.
Kevin, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, because you covered a bevy of topics, which is terrific, but I believe it was the FAO that said there were actually contingency funds that were being put to certain projects. I don't know if you heard or read that too. Anything you wanted to talk about, specifically about the fact that contingency funds are being put towards, like there's money there and they're not using it, sort of thing.
Yeah. I think that's where I'm confused. So I'm a bit nervous about saying exactly what they did, because I see that service, I see the surplus, I see the contingency funds, and then I haven't been able to put those two things together so that they make sense. I do know though, so maybe I'm going sideways again a little bit here, but one of the ways that they've been attracting business is by taking money away from injured workers, from WSIB. So they claim that there was a surplus of $1.2 billion, which they gave to the big employers. Now, I know that injured workers are being really shoved under the bus. And at best, they wind up having to apply for ODSP, which we know is not enough to live on. And even if it were, it is business's responsibility to be supporting the WSIB. It is not a public responsibility. So that is a misuse of those funds to give that back to business as a way to attract business. It's really robbing one group to benefit another group and repurposing that money in a way that it's not supposed to be used. Other groups that are people who are really suffering, children with autism. You probably saw that, the recent media report about, and they had to get a freedom of information, go through that process to get those details, which really says that 60,000 kids are not going to be funded for the support that they need, and think they're much worse off than under the previous program.
Thanks for joining us for today's edition of Word for Word. We'll be back next week with more interviews from across the Northwest.